So in the previous tutorial, like we covered the camera related features, and now let's look at how we can further improve our existing weapon system, right? So for example, currently, like let's say when I equip a weapon, it actually doesn't show any sort of visualization for the aim at the heart, right? So so this visualization is actually called crosshair, right? So when I equip the weapon, ultimately it should show a crosshair, uh, typically like the center of the HUD, right? And when I go back to the unarmed state, since I haven't equipped any weapon, it should hide that specific crosshair, right? Right. So now let's see how we can implement this crosshair widget. Okay. So to get started, you can create a dedicated widget at the UI. The UI under weapon, I'll create a new user interface widget called WB Crosshair. Right. Then let's add a safe zone component, safe zone panel actually, right? And then I'll add an overlay on top of the safe zone. Then let's add a size box. So I'll orient it to the center and add a default width and height override be like 128 by 128, right? Then then let's add another overlay on top of or within this size box. There I'll add maybe image, right? And it should align to the center, and as the image size, I'll give 2 by 2, and you can see like now it's sort of like a rectangular shape, but I think it would be nice if we make it like a sort of a rounded one. So I can select this rounded box, so you can see now it's sort of like a dot, right? And then let's add sort of like bar visualizations to the top, bottom, left and right, so that our crosshair will be much more targeted to this specific point. Plus later on actually we can add sort of like a dynamic behaviors to those bars as well, right? So to do that, I'll add another size box and overlay. So this size box should actually cover the entire area of the parent overlay. So I'll make it fill horizontally and fill vertically, and this overlay will be automatically applied that specific size configuration. Then let's add another image. and align it to the center. As the image size, I'll give 2 by 10, and I'll give some sort of a padding to the top axis. If I give a padding to the bottom axis, it will go to the top, right? So I'll give a padding like 8 to bottom, and I'll rename this one as top, and this one I'll rename as target, right? And I'll copy the same thing and paste it to the same overlay, but this time instead of giving a padding to the bottom, I'll give a padding to top. Bottom padding should be 0, and this one is bottom, and I'll copy it again, and this one I'll give a padding to the right axis, 0 by 0 by minus 8. Sorry, not that one. That's the bottom. This one, 0 by 0 by minus 8 by 0. Right. And this one, actually, this, I think it has been resetted. 8, right? Okay, so the right bar is now there. So we need to rotate it. So I'll add sort of an angle to here. Right, and this one is basically right. And I'll copy the same thing. And this instance should be left axis offset minus 8 padding, 0 by 0 by 0. And for the rotation also, it should inverse the angle. It should be minus 90, right? And I'll rename this as left. Okay, so these padding values and angle values are essential, so make sure they are exact same like I added, right? So you can actually make this one as maybe minus 10 or minus 12 or minus 6 or whatever, but the sign and the magnitude should be somewhat aligned with my configurations, right? Otherwise, when later on when we're adding like dynamic crosshair features, it may not work properly, right? So make sure you follow the same approach like I do. Right, now I think this crosshair would be fine, right? So we have sort of like a dot here, and we have like bar items like this. Okay, then what we can do, then we can add this to the HUD when the weapon is equipped, right? How to do that? First, let's go to the blueprint components, subsystems, user interface system. So we should create a specific function to create and toggle this crosshair. Yeah, I think we can duplicate the same function. Duplicate and rename it as create crosshair widget. And here, instead of using the WB weapon, I'll use WB crosshair. get rid of this reference and I'll create a new reference called WB Crosshair. And let's replace all the required references. Okay. And similarly, let's add a toggle weapon functionality. So I'll duplicate this one and I'll rename it to toggle crosshair. So there actually we don't need to toggle its visibility like this. Maybe we can create a macro for that to toggle its visibility states. Yeah. But yeah, first I will plug the required create crosshair widget. Now we need a way to actually control its visibility as well. So currently I have this design where we can manipulate the visibility like this, and I can even use the same code in here as well. That's fine. But I feel like if we follow that approach, there will be a code duplication, right? Because you can see that the same functionality will be at here and here, right? Which is not quite a good practice. So in this scenario, I think we can create a macro to handle all of those stuff for us. So we don't need to worry about these specific nodes one by one manually. Yeah. So I'll create a macro called m toggle widget. Right. And this should check the validity of the widget. But first let's add an execution pin. This should be the type of execution exec, and it should take a widget reference as well. Widget, yeah. And if this one is valid, then we can return a valid reference called valid, or we can return another execution path called invalid. Right. So if it is invalid, actually there is nothing we can do. We can simply return to that specific execution path. But if it is valid, then we have ability to control its visibility, right? Because that's a valid reference. So let's add another input called visible. This is the type of boolean. And I'll get the reference from this widget object and call set visibility function there. So if it is valid, then we have the ability to control its visibility. I'll organize these pins a little bit, otherwise it looks a bit cluttered. Right. And based on this visible input that we given, we can control that visibility enumeration. So if it is visible, then we can set the visibility state as visible, and if it is false, then we can make it as hidden. Right. So this macro can be used at our crosshair now. So now I can get rid of this is valid, and instead let's simply plug this macro. So this is the reference and this is the input, and if it is invalid only we are going to create the crosshair widget. Right. So you can see like now the code is much more cleaner and we doesn't have a code duplication because all of those visibility managements will be happen at here. Right, anyway, so since I generalized this feature called mToggle widget macro, we can use the same macro within other toggle widget functionalities as well. Okay? For example, now I don't need this stuff. Instead, I can simply use this macro and pass the reference accordingly and plug the execution pins properly. Okay? So you can see like there is no code duplication. Okay. But if I play it, it doesn't show the crosshair yet because we haven't called that toggle crosshair functionality yet. Right, now let's go to the weapon base. There we have this equip functionality. Okay, so I'll create a new function first called set crosshair. Right. So there I'll get the user interface system based on the owner that I whoever they inherit this specific weapon, plus this owner should be a player, right? Because we don't need to actually show a crosshair when a NPCs equip the specific weapon, right? This should happen only when the player is the player equip a specific weapon. And then we can simply call the toggle crosshair and then we can simply make it true. But if I do like this now, even if I'm at the unarmed mode, no, it's not showing, right? Because I haven't called this function. But anyway, once I call this function, even when I'm at the unarmed weapon state, it will show the crosshair. But that's fine. So let's test the crosshair first and improve this stuff further. So when I'm equip the weapon, right? Maybe I'll add that feature here. It should set the crosshair accordingly, like that. When I'm equip the weapon, right? So whenever this blueprint interface function is being called, it will set the crosshair, right? Okay. Seems like we have error. Okay, sorry. At this toggle crosshair function, I used the invalid reference, right? So we shouldn't use WB weapon. Instead, we should have used WB crosshair, right? Otherwise that reference is dead and it can't actually instantiate this specific crosshair for us. Okay, such bugs can be happen, that's fine. Now let's play. Okay, still not there. Okay, we have another error. Right, so I just added a debug pointer here. So if you can see, I've just tried to print the owner reference, right? Because I thought like the owner reference is dead, but if I played, you can see the player base is printing properly, which means the owner reference is fine. But if I try to print this get user interface system reference, you can see it doesn't print anything, okay? Which means actually this reference is not given properly, okay? And ideally, like I think this function we have to change a bit, okay? So I'll go to the get user interface system function that we defined at BFL utilities as a subsystem helper function. So here, instead of getting a owner, I'll get the player controller HUD directly, right? Because either way we are going to have a one HUD for a given player. Therefore, we don't need to explicitly cast for a specific owner of this instance, right? Because at the end, like it would be only a one singleton object or a player instance who will have a specific HUD, right? So we don't need the owner. So I'll remove that input and instead let's get the player controller and check whether we have a valid player controller or not. And if we have a valid player controller, then I can get the HUD reference out of it. And we can check whether we have a valid HUD reference or not. And ideally this HUD is the our given HUD that we specified at the game mode. So if we have all of these valid references, then we can get component by class from that specific HUD, right? And at any scenario, if we have a valid reference, then we can return invalid reference. So there I will sort of organize the pins like this. Okay, now it looks much more cleaner, right? And since I made a change for the input, let's see where are the references for this specific functionality. Right, you can see like we only have the references at the BP weapon base because I just used this function now. So we don't need to actually make many modifications. Let's simply go back to our own implementation, which is the BP weapon base set crosshair functionality, and let's get rid of this owner reference instance here or input here, and now we have a proper reference, I believe. So let's play test and see. Okay, now you can see it prints the reference, plus you can see the crosshair now appeared on the HUD, which is actually what we need. But you can see like even when I'm at the unarmed mode, the crosshair has been appeared, which is not ideally what I want, right? I just need to appear that crosshair whenever I equip the armed weapon like this, right? Maybe a rifle or maybe a pistol, something like that. Right, so the change is quite straightforward, but first let's get rid of this print string. And then we should have sort of like a configurable value to toggle these visibilities based on the blueprint that we are working on. So I think at the weapon config we can add such a configuration, right? So let's go and open that data structure called sweapon config, right? There I'll add a new variable called enable crosshair, right? This is a boolean variable and by default it's false. Now if I go to the weapon base and compile it, you can see that specific configurable field is available at our weapon base. Then I'll get that field from the weapon config and plug it to here. And now you can see at the unknown node we can't see any crosshair, and also like if even if I equip the firearm weapon, I can't see the crosshair because those instances also the enable crosshair is false. And in order to fix that, let's go to the weapons firearm base, and at the weapon config I'll enable the crosshair, right? And also like since this is the weapon firearm weapon base parent class for both rifle and pistol, we don't need to explicitly go those instances one by one and do enable this crosshair, because by default since this is a parent class, all of those fields will be automatically overridden at the or automatically will be set at the child instance level as well, right? So we don't need to worry about that. So if I equip rifle, now you can see it shows the crosshair. If I go back to the unknown boot, it won't show any crosshair. And you can see even if I equip the pistol, it will show the crosshair, right? And let's say if I equip the melee weapon, it won't show the crosshair because at the melee weapon base, that enable crosshair feature is disabled or it is false. Right. And also I think when I'm at the sprinting like this, ideally we shouldn't show the crosshair, right? Because even the camera state also goes to that sprinting state. So ideally I think we should hide the crosshair whenever I'm sprinting, right? So how we can do that? I think at the interfaces weapons I have this BPI sprint functionality. So let's check and see whether we are getting a valid event out of this specific blueprint function event or blueprint interface event. Yes, so you can see if I try to sprint, actually it's printing that specific state, but now it won't sprint because it has been sort of overridden at our child instances. Because I think I have overridden this BPI sprint at the child instance. That's why. Maybe if I delete all of those stuff at my child instance and go to the weapon base. Yes, there we have a dedicated functionality called BPI sprint to handle all of those sprint functionalities. Right, and there at the end of this camera state stuff, I'll add this set crosshair as well. right? And there also I'll go to the implementation, and maybe I'll check whether I'm sprinting or not. And if I'm sprinting, I can do a selection again. Select to this specific boolean, and if I'm sprinting, either way this crosshair shouldn't be visible at any state, so the true is false at here. And if I'm not sprinting, then by default it's false, and whatever the weapon configuration, it should be passed to here. Right, and make sure you call that function at bpi sprint as well. Okay, now let's see. So I equipped the rifle. Okay, now you can see when I'm sprinting, it won't show that crosshair, and if I stop sprinting, it shows the crosshair back. Okay, and for the weapons that doesn't have a crosshair, actually it won't showcase any. Right, so that's how we can add a crosshair as a widget for our HUD. And in the next tutorial, let's see how we can make some dynamic adjustments to this crosshair, right? For example, like when I'm moving, the crosshair should be spreaded, right? Or when I'm shooting, the crosshair should spread a bit, something like that. So let's see those dynamic capabilities later on, and see you there. Thank you.